My talk today is the patient impact of regulatory challenges and roadblocks to participation in clinical trials only conducted outside the U.S. First, I want to thank RDLA, Shire, and the National Health Council for pulling together this briefing. I think ultra and fast are going to help a lot of people. I think after you hear my story, you'll know that our job isn't done. And I think to tell our story, I have to rewind back to the day my son was diagnosed with Sanfilippo syndrome. I was traveling from Dallas to Silicon Valley. This picture. On January 14th, 2011, I got a call from my wife about an hour before a big meeting. And she told me that our son had been diagnosed with a disease I'd never heard of called Sanfilippo syndrome, that he would likely die by the time he's 15. There was no treatment or cure, and that I would be forced to watch him lose all of his intellectual ability, starting with the ability to walk and talk, down to the ability to simple things like eat and breathe. Somehow, I held it together for my meeting, went back to my hotel that night, and I searched on clinicaltrials.gov for something that might help him. And I found an enzyme replacement study called the SAN 055 study being conducted by Shire in Amsterdam and the UK. And I was happy because it seemed like maybe there was some hope. And of course, the idea of moving didn't sound great, but you do whatever you have to do for your kids. And a few minutes later, I found the following letter that was posted. Maybe 10 minutes later, it says, essentially, this is written to the MPS Society from Shire. We've heard that many of you have started to receive questions about Shire's Sanfilippo A program. It goes on to say there's actually going to be two studies. First, a natural history study that's done here in the U.S. At the University of Minnesota. It will take 20 patients, and the study participants will not receive enzyme therapy. There'll be a second study conducted overseas that will study the safety and efficacy of ERT, enzyme replacement therapy, explains the dose. Then it goes on to say, we understand that many families have inquired about the possibility of relocating to either the Netherlands or UK in order to participate in the study. This time, Shire expects there will be enough Sanfilippo A patients in both locations to complete trial enrollment. In fairness, to families in these countries, we're not accepting patients who reside outside these regions. We believe that our current approach moves us with greatest efficiency towards a definitive trial. It goes on to explain Shire's commitment to rare disease. So that was day one, 670 days ago. And I think probably like most of you, I didn't set out to change the world, just to try and find some help for my son. And so my first reaction is, okay, there's this huge roadblock in front of me. I gotta find some way under it, over it, around it, through it. I don't have the time to try and knock this wall down. I gotta do something. And so the first thing I did was travel to a medical conference where I met the medical director that's running this program. And I asked him, what can I do to get around these limitations? What can be done? Surely I can move. Surely there's some way to get the drug outside the trial. And it was explained to me, first, the drug company wanted a US trial site, but was not allowed to open one. That the fastest route to market was through Europe for early safety and efficacy studies, and that patients were selected in those countries out of fairness. I couldn't really argue with that. And I asked about compassionate use or expanded access. At that point, one patient had received one dose, and of course, it's a naive request, but I asked him, well, why not? Let's try it. And he said basically that the FDA, and probably both FDA and Shire, would refuse such a request. And so I went home, again, just didn't know what my next step was going to be, and I had a work assignment in Washington, and so I took it and basically tried to get a meeting with someone at FDA to ask them why this happened, to put the question to them. Why did this happen? And I got a meeting with Dr. Rao's predecessor, Dr. Tim Cote, and I asked him two questions. One, why there were no US trial sites, and two, would they stand in the way of compassionate access? And I didn't really get an answer on my question around the U.S. trial sites. Dr. Cote cited the need for, just privacy and that sort of thing. But he went on to say that compassionate access wasn't typically impeded by the FDA, and that the objection that industry has around the compassionate access, especially around adverse events, were a myth. And then he called the medical director for this program in front of me on a speakerphone and said all these things to me. I was blown away. I didn't expect it at all. And so I got in my car and headed to the airport that night and thought, problem solved. Problem solved, right? And so I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I needed a doctor, and I knew I needed the drug company to go along with this. And so I booked a ticket to North Carolina, and I flew from Dallas to North Carolina to see Dr. Munzer, the only doc in the U.S. that had experience using the device. I asked him, he said, I've never heard of anything like this, but we'll try. And so I went back to my executives who knew about Reed's situation and had offered to help. And I got a letter from my CEO sent to Dr. Sylvie Gregoire, president of Shire HGT, which I'll paraphrase here. It essentially says, Cisco and our family have done everything we can to try and find help for Reed. That they're aware of the study going on overseas, and that Cisco will do anything to help remove barriers. For example, rules for almost immediate resident status through corporate knowledge worker transfer. We would like to place such a move on the table. It recounts the events that happened in Dr. Cote's office, and then it says, Cisco is 100% support of Roy and his family as they seek treatment for Reed. We are ready to offer financial support and prepared to relocate the family to any treatment site. We need your support and the support of Shire to give. Please join us as we work to give Reed a fighting chance. So I don't bring that letter up to sound immodest or to name drop, but just to say, man, I have done everything I possibly can. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have pushed as hard as I can in every possible way. And probably a lot of people in this room who I don't even recognize, I've talked before, and they recognize, and maybe you've even helped me to try and make something happen. There's no way around the wall. I recognize that the only way to fix this problem is to figure out why this is happening and fix the basic problem. And I wrote a letter to Dr. Burgess, who is in a neighboring district, and I'd watched his testimony during the PDUFA hearings, and basically I just, again paraphrasing, I told him about the study, and I said, I've learned that the process of moving early trials overseas is happening broadly across many diseases. As a result, I am told of the fact that the regulatory environment in Europe is much more open to initiating early stage trials. With a 100% chance of death without treatment, most any parent would choose to accept some risk and move forward with a treatment that could save their child. I asked him to convey the urgency that we thought this needed to the FDA. And finally, I said this statement, which makes me cringe a little bit, but made sense to me at the time, and I stand behind what I said here. It's my concern that the FDA is not properly motivated to allow new treatments to come to market. I don't say that to call into question the devotion or the motivation of the good people that work in the department, but only to say it as a fact. I understand what I, as a patient, have at stake. If we're complete cynics, I understand what industry has at stake in bringing a drug to market. They need to make money. At least I understand a motivation. I don't understand the motivation of a regulator to take the kind of risk that I need to give my son a chance. And, I'm not a drug development expert, and people have come to me and said, we feel good when we approve a new drug. How do you measure that? How do you measure goodwill? I don't understand that. People say we can look at the number of drugs approved, and even if it goes up, how do we know it shouldn't have been 3 or 4 times more? I think the problem is that there's no way to measure the opportunity cost of not doing something. And so, in summary, I'll just say, I remember walking into our kitchen about 16 months ago and seeing Reed eating a snack at the table, and him looking up to me and saying, Dad, I'm angry at you. And I said, why, buddy? And he just kind of laughing, and he said, I'm just joking. And I thought, how could this kid be that sick? Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe he'll be okay. Today, I'll tell you the truth, my son, if he wants a drink, he can't tell me anymore. He has to take my hand and guide it to a cup. I guess he can't say I'm thirsty, Dad. It did not have to be this way. He should have had a chance. His time is running out, and his life is still valuable to me. It's precious. So I'm here as the father of a very sick boy, born with a death sentence, unable to make an enzyme. And though this therapy is being developed right here in the US by a company, our kids have not had a chance to access this treatment or the trial. And I think that's wrong.